what's cool here at Cross Church is we like to hear people's stories. We like to hear how God's working in your life, how God has worked in your life, how far he's brought you, maybe something that's happened in your past, and we definitely like to celebrate those. So if you have those stories, come find us, because we want to celebrate that. We want to give the glory to God, and we want to share that with the rest of the church. But we also learn from our history. We have something called Celebrate Recovery here on Wednesdays. And what it is, really, I was thinking about this, is it's people that have been and have had a lot of history and have been through a lot of things, and more so not so good. And they've taken that and what they've learned from that, and God has brought them through that to show others that God can do the same for them and point them in the direction of Jesus. And so a lot of times, our history is really who we are, and when we reflect on that and we look and we plan our lives according to what God has brought us through. And honestly, that's no different here in Joshua 4. And so I want to catch up, because right now, Israel is on the edge of crossing into the Jordan. And these are the next generation of people that had to listen to all God's promises, had to watch them screw up, had to watch them be unfaithful to God. They had to listen to, man, what it's going to be like over there. And they had to essentially watch their parents die before they could get to this point. And so they had to sit there and listen, watch a whole generation of funerals. And so these people were excited. They were ready. And God had crossed into the Jordan first. And it said the waters had stood in a heap. And it said in Joshua 3:17, now the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan. And all Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Imagine how exciting this was for these people. Some of them had to be at least 40, right? Because they were there for 40 years. Finally, we get to go into the promised land. Finally, all the stuff my parents, we don't have to do this anymore. We get to go and do what God has for us finally. So picking up at chapter 4, and I'm going to read this, so bear with me, 11 verses. It says this, when all the nation had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, said, take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, command them, saying, take 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in a place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, pass on before the ark of the Lord your God into the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the people of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, what do these stones mean to you? And then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. So these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, took up the 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over to the place where they had lodged and laid them down there. And Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the ark of the covenant had stood. And they were there, and they're there to this day. And for the priests bearing the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people passed over in haste, right? Because they're looking at this, I'm out of here. And when all the people had finished passing over, the ark of the Lord and the priests passed over before the people. Okay, I teach kids. Is anybody visualizing that? Here we are. God stood up the water in the heap. And last week we learned that the river was at least a mile wide because it was at flood stage. And so God stood the waters up. It said they passed over in haste because they're looking at the waters. And they said, take 12 stones out and place them over here where you're going to camp tonight. And Joshua, you take 12 stones and you put them in the water. And like, okay, well, it's like God hit the pause button, right? Here it was, I believe it was something close to 1 million people were ready. These people were ready, if you're thinking about it. And they're like, wait, let's just stop for a minute, because I don't want you to forget this. And not only that, but your kids are going to ask And what are you going to tell them? And here's what I'm going to tell you to tell them, right? So, man, God was saying, hey, wait a minute. Let's remember this moment before we get on with our journey, right? Let's remember this so you don't forget it. And so you have to understand that He's been through there. And in a lot of the 40 years, God was showing them, like, hey, there's a lot of things I'm doing for you, but you guys are kind of taking this for granted. And these are the new people, and they didn't want to take that for granted, and God was with them, showing them that. But there's symbolism in this. There's symbolism in this. And that I once heard this a while back, and this was some time ago, and I never really applied it. And somebody said, if you read the Old Testament and you look for Jesus, you'll see him everywhere. And when I read about Apostle Paul in Galatians, he went away for 3 years and was taught of Jesus about all the places he was in the Old Testament. There's so much foreshadowing, so much telling of Jesus' coming and symbolism, right? It says that the ark had passed over the people. And if you skip ahead to verse 19, it says on the 10th day of the first month. When the Bible gives a specific time like that, take note, okay? Because God doesn't give those times. The 10th day of the first month, when you look at the first Passover, that was when Moses had Israel go out and get the lamb to be sacrificed, to put the blood on their doorway. So this was the symbol that Israel crossing over on this day was the sacrificial lamb that Jesus would come through to save us all. Okay, so there's the symbolism there, and there's where you see Jesus. So moving on, verse 13. About 40,000 people were ready for war, had passed over before the Lord for battle to the plains of Jericho. And on that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him just as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. There was God saying, you know what, I'm going to lift you up, Joshua, amongst these people. And 40,000 people is a lot of people ready for war. They're battle ready. They got armor. Probably they got weapons. Who knows what they had, but they were ready for war. Anybody ever here be ready for war? I get mad. You get mad at a lot of things, but man, getting ready for war is a pretty serious endeavor. So here they were ready for war. And Joshua was lifted up by God by saying, hey, this is your leader who I'm with. Right? You watch him and you listen to him, and I will give him instructions to pass down to you. And so picking up verse 19, it says, the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up at Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? And you shall let your children know Israel passed over the Jordan, and for the Lord dried up the grounds, and as your Lord did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Here it was. They were ready to celebrate. They were getting ready for the next challenge. They were ready for war. 40, man, is anybody else just picturing this, or is it just me? Like 40,000 people. I think of like anybody getting like a Cardinals game or maybe like a baseball game. Like it's like roughly like 40 or 60,000 people, right? That's a lot of people going, and they're ready, and unfortunately, they weren't ready. And what gets me is that they still needed to prepare for the next victory, okay? Because, did anybody watch the Astros and the Yankees game last night? Anybody catch that? That game was awesome, though. I mean, even if you're a fan of one team or another, you have to admit that was a really good game. And so now the Astros have won, and they celebrated that victory probably last night. What do you think they're doing today? They're watching film for the World Series. They're getting ready for the World Series. They took the time to celebrate so they don't forget it, but now they're getting ready to move on. Like you can't sit there and dwell on that past victory for the rest of your life, right? Every good leader, every good team, any good company will take victories, dwell on them, celebrate, and move on. So that's essentially what they're doing. And so picking up here, at chapter 5, okay, this was Joshua, this is preparing for the next victory. And as soon as all the kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan to the west, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan for the people of Israel until they had crossed over, their hearts melted, and there was no longer any spirit in them because of the people of Israel. And at the time the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath-Halerah. Joshua, I have questions. Anybody? Wait a minute, Joshua. We're ready for war. Did you not, what was this? Where was this at? Did you not read verse, was this 2? Like their hearts melted. There was no longer any spirit in them. Can we do that thing with the flint knives afterwards? Let's go do this first, right? Like, Joshua, what? But you know what's cool is you don't read that. You don't read anybody questioning Joshua's leadership. You don't read anybody questioning, man, wait a minute, Joshua, hold on. Like, let's go do the mission first. And maybe we can find like something better than a flint knife, and we're not out in this field. Coincidentally, Gibeath-Halerah is translated to the hill of foreskins. So if you're ever visiting this region of the world and you happen to go by this place and maybe there's a plaque like, hey kids, it's Gibeath-Halerah. So just tell your kids about this place. I don't know, maybe you want to wait till they're a little older. So again, what, Joshua? But what's awesome is when you really look at this, Joshua was essentially getting them ready physically and spiritually. And Joshua was going back to what God had promised him. If you go all the way back to Joshua chapter 1, verse 8, it says, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all what is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. You have to understand that circumcision back then was God's way of marking his people. It was God's way of saying, you be faithful in this. And a lot of times, I believe this is what they did on the 8th day after you were born. That's when it was done, not when you were 40 or a little younger. So maybe made it a little easier. But this was God's way to say, hey, you need to do this in order to be my people. Okay? I want you to really think about this for a minute. Because obviously this wasn't happening when they were in the wilderness. Their parents didn't do this for them, which was just another act of disobedience that this generation had to suffer through with their parents while they were walking around aimlessly, waiting on God to go, hey, let's cross over the Jordan. So I want to ask, because I was thinking about this, and I was like, man, what if we had to do something similar in order to just come in here and worship God? Right? What if in order to be, part of the church or just come in the doors, and something similar even for the women as well, like some kind of like painful act of obedience that you had to go through. Do you think that anyone would really be in church? Let's be honest here. How faithful could a lot of us be if we're standing there in the middle of a field and the dude's got a flint knife going, hey, we got to do this? I'm going to be honest. Honestly, I would be the one, and I already said it, like, hey, Joshua, wait, hold on a second. Can we think this over? Like, maybe let me go check out the church down the road real quick, and I'll catch back up with you next Sunday. You know what I mean? Like, let's be honest here. So if we had to do something like that. But what's cool, actually, what is beautiful, is Colossians 2:11 says, in him also you were circumcised, with the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the flesh, by the circumcision of Christ. Isn't that awesome? That we can come in here and we can believe in Jesus, and he did the circumcising of our hearts. And he cut off all the nastiness. And he's doing a great work in us. And man, that's just a beautiful promise to us. And not only that, but man, I don't think I could handle, especially with a flint knife, coming into church going, hey, dude, like, I don't want to be part of ministry. Like, I don't want to have to tell other people I got to do this to them. Like, that's just not, that'd be a hard part in ministry. So God had a plan for them. And although it wasn't clear, he was trying to get them to do bigger things. And they had to start by being obedient to his will and growing up in faith. They had to do the hard things to get right with God. You ever have to do the hard things to get right with God? Some of us, I'm gonna ask you to be honest in here with yourself today, because I'm going to get into a harder part of this. And so doing the hard things to get right with God, and also to put the past behind you and to press on. Okay? Do the hard things, press on. Picking up at verse 8, and this is where the people, they had to hold loosely to the past victories. So verse 8, it says, when circumcised and the whole nation was finished, they remained in their places in the camp until they were healed. And the Lord said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. And so the name of that place is called Gilgal to this day. And while the people of Israel were encamped in Gilgal, they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month in the evening on the plains of Jericho. And on the day after Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, the unleavened cakes and the parched grain, and the manna ceased the day after they ate of the produce of the land. And there was no longer manna for the people of Israel, but they ate the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. That's awesome. God is saying, I rolled away the reproach of Egypt. That's in the past. Let it go. That doesn't define you. That was something that you went through. That was something that went through in your history. That's something you're not going to forget. But that's not you anymore. Use that to move on. Do the hard things to get right with me and move on. Let's press on, because we got bigger things. And what I think is the beautiful part about this is they celebrated Passover and they ate from the fruit of the land. Finally, they didn't have to pick up the manna off the ground anymore. They got to eat the fruit of the land. And what's cool is that God was essentially saying, look, y'all, it's time to grow up. It's time to grow up, that I'm not going to sit here and make you breakfast, lunch, and dinner anymore. Anybody that's ever got kids in their family, in their life, or maybe teenagers, I know my kids, we're starting to get to this point where it's like, look, I'll make you breakfast, but the rest of the time, there's the kitchen, right? Janae, you with me? I know we told Miss Pryor this the other day. Look, y'all, there's the kitchen. Like, you guys live here too. Like, go help yourselves. Go learn to make something. Go do something, right? And essentially, that's what God was doing here. Look, there's the kitchen, y'all. Look what I brought you over to. Like, I need you to grow up and start fending for yourself, because I've got bigger things for you. And so, what can you take away from all this? And, I got 2 points here that I want to make from a lot of this. And I once heard a pastor say this, and this has stuck with me for years. And it says, to look back at the scrapbook of your life, and you'll find Jesus there, even in the hard times, even in the abused times. No matter what you've gone through in life, you will see that Jesus was there in your life, and he was bringing you through. And to not forget how far you've come, or what you've overcome, but use it to find out where you are going. Your trials, your situations, your problems. You can help find what God is pulling you through to point you in the direction of where he wants to take you to. And so you have to view this all through the lens of what God is asking you. And you'll certainly start to find the right path once you start asking, what is God asking me of me? And the next point is that I want you to get right with God. And that Jesus came here, and he came to show us his will. And I want to ask if you're living in his will. Because Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing that may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. And I want to ask, is anybody contemplating what is God's will in their life today? See, because I've been in ministry for a little while. I didn't grow up in the church, but I started to work in ministry, and I started to work with other people, and you start to really just kind of listen. And honestly, working with other people, it requires just a lot of listening. And and I know some people will agree with me in here that a lot of times when you start working with people and you're listening to their story and you're listening to their trials and they're showing up and they're wondering when God's going to make a move in their life, that they're sitting there doing something that they know they shouldn't be doing. They're sitting there going, man, I wish God would just turn this thing around for me. I wish God would just take this addiction away from me. And in reality, they're not even trying to remove it from themselves. And it's almost like they're standing on the other side of the Jordan going, you know what? I don't want to do that yet. I don't want to let this go yet. And man, we see it so commonly, and we see people walk away from church and they don't come back maybe for another month or two when their life has maybe taken a turn for the worse. And we're going, yeah, man, well, have you tried to do this? Well, I haven't really tried to do that. Well, what's stopping you? It might seem hard now, but what is it worth to you? What is God asking you to let go of? So think about what's going on in your life right now. And maybe you're a regular church attender, but something's holding you back from doing something, from serving, from getting involved, to getting to know other people, from doing something for somebody else. Think about that. What is holding you back from that? But you know what? Out of these 2 chapters, I don't think that those are the biggest lessons. And starting at verse 13, it's that we need to follow God to his victory. So picking up verse 13, it says, when Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, no, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped him and said to him, what does the Lord say to his servant? And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, take off your sandals from your feet. The place you are standing is holy ground. And Joshua did so. I love that. Are you with us or are you against us? So many people want to paint this picture of this loving God. No! I'm God. We're not going to work on that right now. I'm here. Take off your shoes. You ever think about God in that way? You ever come with God with such reverence that you want to cry out to him in your prayers and you're going, man, God, please rescue me from this. Please, God, I just need this. God, I just want you to be with this. No. Take off your shoes. I'm God. Anybody ever stop and just go, hey, wait a minute. You have a will for me. You're God. I can't believe I'm coming at you with my problems when I just want to do your will. And also, this is a big one, and this is just a bit of a lesson here, that this is a Christophany. And what that is a pre-Christ manifestation. And how do we know that for a fact? Because Joshua was not rebuked for worshiping him. And when you read things like that in the Old Testament, that's where you see essentially Christ had come down in another form to interact with us. And that is awesome. So what did Joshua miss there? Joshua missed God in his presence and what he may have thought was God's plan for him. Okay? And he was essentially taking it for granted to be on the right side of things. God, you were with me through the water. You raised it up in a heap. You lifted me up in front of all the people. You said, hey, I am their leader. You had me take these stones. You had me circumcise them all in this field, even though they were ready to go battle. I'm on the right path, God. I've got to be. So let me just keep going. God was like, hey, wait a second. Let's just take this one step at a time. Let's just take this my step at a time. So remember the one in which you serve. Come to God in reverence and awe and fearful wonder, and take your shoes off when needed. So as you grow in the faith, you're going to start to gain a new perspective. And I can speak for this wholeheartedly in my personal life, that I used to have these prayers, and I used to cry out, and I used to get mad with God, and I used to almost like I was arguing with God. And it wasn't until I really started studying his word and being faithful to the mission and getting involved with ministry and serving and doing the things that my prayers suddenly turned to, God, be with me, to God, I want to be with you. What is your will for me? And that, my friends, is inevitable growth. You will grow as you study, as you get involved, as you do things, that you're going to start to see, wait a minute, God just said, God, I'm crying out to you. God just said, no, I'm here. Fall on your face. Take your shoes off. Worship me. So, someone said it best with this, that my concern is not whether God is on our side, but my greatest concern is to be on God's side, for God is always right. And I believe that really sums up a lot. So, I want to ask you guys to really check yourself today and see whose side you're on. Are your prayers his will, or are they yours? So I know we all got problems in here. If anybody doesn't have any problems in here, then amen to you, that's awesome. But a lot of us got problems in here. And we're going through a lot of things. Life's not easy. But are we doing God's will? And it's amazing that, all your trials and circumstances from your past are really probably pointing you in His direction. So, before I close, and before I pray for us, I want to ask you in here, is there anybody in here that is just tired of fighting losing battles? You're tired of just going up against the world. You're tired of kicking the goads, as the Bible says. You're just fighting all the things of life, and you're losing at every single turn. And it sucks, doesn't it? So I want to actually invite you, and like we said when we opened, Pastor Andrew, that you can text us. You can text us at 94000, and you can say, I said yes. Because we all know Jesus, and we all believe that Jesus is the one that's going to pull us through all that stuff. And so if that's you, and you're interested in that, and you want to go, you know what? Maybe I don't know Jesus. Maybe there's something different that I see other people have in their life, and I just want to taste that victory. So let us know. You can meet some of us back there in the corner. Come find some of us. We'd love to talk with you. But just let us know. Because, man, you never know what's waiting for you when you walk out this door. You never know what's waiting for you out in the parking lot. Maybe the same situation and issues is waiting for you. Wouldn't you like to go and take them on with a new perspective? Wouldn't you like to go and take them on, going, you know what? I know God's will in my life, and I don't even need to deal with that anymore. God has a plan for me. So let me pray. And again, I want to invite you to come find us, come back to the corner, text us, let us know. And let me pray, and we'll close.